Well, we know one thing. When you fire a bullet, it goes downrange. The question is, does it rise before it heads downrange or while it's going downrange, or does it immediately fall? There's a lot of confusion about this. We're going to try to clear the air on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors. Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. Say, I've done a lot of videos on ballistics, trajectory curves, what bullets do in flight. It's called exterior ballistics, and it's a study. The military's been playing around with cannon fire for a long time, and of course it applies to long-range target shooting, but also to hunting. It's just basic physics, I guess, but it's quite confusing. When I was a younger man, I was a little bit confused about how much your bullet climbed before it started dropping in there, and whether or not it actually did. And plenty of folks still are. Recently, I got a spate of complaints from people calling me everything from a dumb old fud to a stupid old fud. But I can understand if they've been taught certain things about ballistics that I'm not spouting, then it becomes what does this guy know anyway? Well, maybe I don't know, but I've done a lot of studying on this, and I think I've got it right. So the physicists out there can maybe back me up on it. Here's the thing. When you launch a bullet out of a rifle barrel, gravity immediately pulls it. It has to. Now, some people wrote in and said there's not even such a thing as gravity, so we're going to discount that one for now. Also, the ones who said the earth wasn't curved and it was flat, we're going to skip those two. We'll argue those another time. But when the bullet is sent off the barrel, it's got to fall. Gravity is always pulling. When doesn't it? As soon as you don't support anything, it falls. Just because it's moving in one direction horizontally doesn't mean that gravity is no longer pulling on it. One gentleman said that because it's moving so fast, it doesn't fall. Another one said the lighter bullets are going to stay up higher than the heavier bullets. The heavier bullets are going to fall faster. So let's deal with that right away. There are some videos online, you can look them up, on dropping objects in a vacuum. And when you do that, you have a bowling ball and a feather, and they both drop exactly the same, hit the ground at the same time. And in rifles, we always say that when you shoot a bullet and you drop a bullet from the muzzle at the same point, not that you could do that because the timing would be pretty difficult, but if you could, drop one and fire one, and they both left the muzzle essentially at the same time, they will both hit the ground at the same time. It's just that the ones fired downrange is going to hit the ground a lot farther downrange. But they are both being pulled by gravity at 32 feet per second, accelerating 32 feet per second. That's the way gravity works, whether or not gravity actually exists or not. I'm just not going to step off a cliff to try to disprove that theory. So the bullet is being pulled. Now the question is, yeah, but if you're throwing it 3,000 to 4,000 feet per second, really, really fast, and it's a lightweight bullet, doesn't it rise before it starts to fall? Here's where the confusion comes in. It's the difference between the sight line and the bore line. The bore line is the departure of the bullet. And if you've got that bore line starting up, your sight line is starting down. Look at the difference in the lines between the two. Here's your sight line, and there's your barrel line. There's a good 1.5 inches, and some rifles 2 inches of difference between those lines. So if you launched your bullet 1.5 inches beneath your sight line, you would never hit what you're aiming at. The sight line has to go down through the bore line, or the bore has to tilt up through the sight line. So when we're adjusting our scopes and even our open sights, we're moving things so that you're looking down through the bore line or the line of flight of your bullet. So you look down through it and roughly 25 to 30 yards. That's why a lot of guys say you can zero your rifle at 25 to 30 yards, be pretty close at 100 or 200 or something, depending on the ballistics coefficient of the bullet and your muzzle velocity. That's because your sight line crosses the bore line. So all barrels have to be angled up slightly to get your bullet downrange. Because yes, gravity does begin pulling your bullet immediately when it leaves the support of the barrel. begins to fall. The faster you throw it, the farther downrange it gets before it hits. So if you've got a 100-yard target and you do not elevate that barrel, you're not going to hit it. You'll be awfully close because it's going so fast, but it's not going to hit it. And for 300 yards, oh yeah, you've got to really start to angle it up. And 1,000 yards, you're launching that thing so the bullet is going good 30, even 40 feet in the air above the target in order to drop into it. So by that measure, you could say your bullets rise after you fire them. But it's not because the bullet's got some kind of a magical formula in it that makes it defy gravity. It's just because you've thrown it up at an angle. So your bullet's going up, your sight is looking down at the target, and the two intersect. As I said, in a normal 300 yardish, 250, you're going to cross at 25 to 30 yards, and the bullet is then going to go above that line because it's been angling up all that time. Starting 1.5 inches or 2 inches below the scope line, crosses above it at 25 yards to 30 yards, rises even higher at 100 yards and 150 yards, and somewhere in that 150 to 200 yard range, it reaches the peak arc of its trajectory. And then begins falling again, and it falls through the line of sight at your zero distance. So if I zero this scope for 250 yards, my bullet is going to cross the line of that scope's sight at about 30 yards, get up about 3 inches high at 150 or so, and then start falling down through and landing on my zero distance, after which, of course, it's falling down, 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 till it hits the ground. It doesn't matter if the bullet weighs 8 grains or 800 grains. It's all velocity and ballistics coefficient. The only difference in the weight of the bullet is how much energy it retains when it gets downrange. Heavier bullet's going to have more energy at a given velocity for sure. Now, there is one situation in which your bullet does not drop. Can anybody guess what that is? And you're sort of looking at it right here, completely vertical. If you can get your barrel to be absolutely dead perfectly vertical, gravity would pull that bullet straight back down. So it would start to slow, stop, and come down, 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 accelerating all the time at 32 feet per second as it came down. Now, there is one case in which your bullet will cross your line of sight one time and never again, and fall in the opposite direction. And that is if you have your barrel slightly tilted this way. So you could have your sight looking perfectly straight up, but the barrel is angled and it crosses your line of sight at 25 yards and falls up. Well, up if you move it like this. You take it up, 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 up until you've gone over the top, and now it's going down, down, down. So your barrel's tilted just a smidgen, and that bullet's going up and over, and it falls in the opposite to normal direction. It's just kind of a little weird, weird thing right there, but now here's a way we can look at it on paper. You guys know me and my ballistic charts, whether you believe in them or not. These are the kinds of numbers and mathematics that rocket scientists use. You know, you're going to figure a satellite has about a lifespan that's going around the Earth beyond the reach of gravity largely, but eventually it does fall. That's why we get those spectacular flashes of light some nights when there's another piece of space junk falling to Earth. That's gravity. But what I did was I ran some numbers in which we would shoot a barrel dead flat versus tilting it up for that longer trajectory reach out to 250 yards. So we're going to look at some numbers when one, same rifle, same bullet, same velocity, everything, but one is dead level and we're not using a scope or any kind of an elevated height sight and keeping it dead level, looking through the bore right to the 100-yard target. So we've got zero elevation on the scope, zero on the target. It's just a dead flat bullet flying out to see how much it drops before it gets out there. And then I did the same thing with a 250-yard zero. And here's how things shook out. With a zeroing range of nothing, just dead flat, at 25 yards, the bullet had fallen 0.12 inch. This is a 130 grain bullet from a 270 going 3,000 feet per second. If I remember right, the BC of the bullet was 48.48. So pretty well-known trajectory in a bullet. At 50 yards, it fell 0.49. So you've got a half inch of drop already at 50 yards from a dead level shot. At 100 yards, 2 inches of drop. 2.02 inches of drop already. At 150 yards, 4.66. At 250, 13.58. And at 300, 20.04 inches of drop from the dead level. Now, if I take the same thing and zero it at 250 yards, at 25 yards, I'm an inch 0.25 still high. And I'm still high at 125 yards, 3.61 inches, 150 yards, 3.51 inches, 175 yards, 3.1. It's arched up above and it's now starting to drop down in through. 200 yards, 240 or 2.4 inches, 250 yards, 0.02. I don't know why that 0.2 is in there, but as you can see, I'm pretty much dead on at 250 yards. And at 300 yards, my drop is only 3.72 inches. So that's just another way of looking at it. Ballistics is a science, and it's used by the military all the time. They don't shoot those tank rounds hoping that they're going to land there just out of luck. That's basically what's going on with bullets in flight. They do not have afterburners. You know, if they really actually rose after you shot them under their own power, they don't have any power. It's what they're carrying is kinetic energy given to them by the expanding gases pushing them out of the barrel. After which they're just floating through the air and constantly falling. If you put some rocket propellant in the back of them, you could give them extra velocity, and then you could make them rise if you had a guidance system. You'd have to have ailerons on them like on a jet. You get less pressure over the top of the wing, more pressure under the wing, and you get lift. There's nothing to give lift to a bullet. Some guys say, well, it's the rifling engraving marks on it or something will make it. Well, those are all the way around the bullet, and the bullet is spinning 200,000 revolutions per minute. So it's the same on all sides. It wouldn't cause it to lift. Now, there might be a chance that with that curved nose, if your bullet isn't perfectly stabilized and it's yawing, you've got some nutation in it, it's not dead perfectly flying like this, but it's tilted a little bit up and circling around like that as it goes, you're going to get some pressures against that curved surface of your ogive, and you could get a little nose uplift to it. But gravity is still pulling that bullet the whole time. So you might not get real good accuracy with it. You might get just a smidgen of lift from that little push right there. But this idea that your bullet's going to rise 2 inches, that comes from having your barrel tilted. So the guys who are insisting that's what's going on are probably as right as the ones who say, no, it's being pulled to the ground all the time. You know, they're both right. It's just, you just have a definition of terms. Are you talking about from the bore line or the sight line? So I hope that explanation makes a little bit of sense to you guys. If you care to differ, write in and we'll go at it again. But I hope I did a pretty adequate description of what's happening here. And it doesn't matter if your bullet's heavy or light or anything. It's all the same stuff to gravity. Air drag will slow some things down. I had an argument with one gentleman who insisted that the bullet coming out of the barrel and the one dropped from the barrel at the same time both hit the ground at the same time. And I said, not necessarily. It depends on how the bullet is sitting, what the profile is of. So if you have your bullet launched downrange this way and it's falling, it's got a bit of drag from the surface area, from the air drag falling as well as moving forward. Whereas if you dropped it from the muzzle point first, you would have less drag and it should hit the ground sooner than the one that's getting more drag being pulled down this way. Very, very tiny little amount, but it just makes sense that if you've got more surface area pushing against the wind or dragging in the wind or the air, it's going to slow it down. So that you might want to argue with me too. And I'm open to arguments, guys. I study this stuff and I think I know it, but maybe I've got it all wrong. The earth really is flat and there is no such thing as gravity and bullets climb as soon as you shoot them. But you're going to have to prove it to me. So until I hear from you and until next time, hunt honest, shoot straight, and look out for that gravity.